Hello, and welcome to Memory Safe. My name is Dennis Fisher. I'm the editor-in-chief of Decipher, and I couldn't be happier today to have my friend Michelle Finneran Dennedy as our guest. If you're not familiar with Michelle's work, allow me to embarrass her for a minute. Michelle studied psychology and economics and then went on to law school and practiced law for a few years before deciding that wasn't painful enough for her. So she decided to jump into tech. Great idea. She joined Sun Microsystems, which was a company that used to make very large computing machines called servers. Those servers eventually became part of the cloud, which is weird because the sun often dissipates clouds, but whatever. Michelle was the first chief privacy officer at Sun and one of the first privacy officers in any company or industry at the time. Again, she figured that wasn't difficult enough, so she decided to write a book called The Privacy Engineer's Manifesto. That book is rad as hell and is basically the foundational text of privacy engineering, and you should definitely go read it. For the kids out there, books were physical records of the stray thoughts of humans who had too much time on their hands. Books no longer exist, except in specialized museums called libraries. Michelle later joined Cisco as the chief privacy officer and did all kinds of rad stuff there too. You get the idea. Michelle is the real thing. Now she's the CEO of her own startup, Privacy Code, which cracks the code between the stuff companies say in policies and rules and the stuff companies actually do. Michelle, welcome to Memory Safe.
Thank you. I feel like I've been down memory lane already, so I'm ready to go.
I can't wait. This is going to be so much fun. Before we started recording, we were both talking about how long we've known each other and how we keep missing each other in real life. So I'm excited to go through these questions with you. We've been on podcasts a lot of times together, and I know enough about your background and things like that. But the idea of this podcast is sort of, we ask the guests the same 10 questions with one or two sort of wild cards thrown in there sometimes, and we see where it goes.
I love it. It's like people are getting real. Like we're integrating our peopleness, which I really love.
Yeah, I think so. So are you ready?
I think so.
Okay. First question. When did you get your first computer?
This is good. I should say Dennis did allow me to see the questions in advance, and I didn't do my homework, so this is all just fresh. So I got my first computer. It was an Apple IIe Plus. My dad and I had to put it together with a soldering iron. At the time, you used to get like the chassis was separate, and then you'd get the motherboard. And my brother was into tinkering and stuff with dad too. So it was like my dad and my brother and I put the thing together. And you had to use BASIC. And I think we had a cassette tape was our only memory. And I would play Scott Adams' The Amazing Cave Adventure on that machine. And I did my first business. Actually, I have a prop. My first business, junior achievement. This
Oh
was
my God. Junior achievement.
stock certificate from 1983. After my dad passed, he bought one share for $1. And on that Apple IIe Plus, I started a business that I called CompuData. And what I did is I took little old ladies' recipe cards and address books, and I would put them into the computer, and I would print out pages of sticky labels for their Christmas cards and stuff for like $5 a sheet or something like that. So that was my first business on my first computer.
That is adorable. Oh my God. That's also the same first computer I had. We had an Apple IIe, not Plus. You had the fancy one.
Fancy.
But my dad was an engineer at IBM, and they didn't make PCs at the time. This was 79, 80, 81.
There was Radio Shack then.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I don't know if we ordered it or if he went and bought it somewhere, but I remember it basically looked like an electric typewriter. It was that size with the keyboard and the CPU and the same thing. And it didn't come with a monitor. We had a black and white TV that was the monitor. Yeah. Definitely played the Cave Adventure and a game called Lemonade Stand.
Yes.
Which like wasn't really a game. You just sold lemonade. Like little people came to your stand and you're like, what? I don't even understand what this is.
We would stare at this for hours. Like it was like a black screen with little green characters going by.
It was so odd. Yeah.
Oh, there were green characters. You were on black and white. So you may not have known.
Yep. Black and white TV. And we definitely had the cassette tape for memory. There was no floppy disk in that thing. So it was literally a cassette tape as the memory device, which is completely insane.
It's wild.
I don't know how the interface worked. I really have no idea. I can't remember.
Like amazing, really. It's like, and it's in some ways things are very similar, and like you think about the components, and now they've sort of disappeared and gotten smaller and smaller. But a lot of the way that we interoperate and we think about computing is still in that early 80s phase. Like you have to
Yeah.
have fingers on keyboards, you have to have some sort of display, you have to have some sort of memory and give it instructions in some way. So it's really interesting that it's we've grown up quite a bit, but we're still kind of in the caveman days of compute, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's really only a little over 40 years of personal computing, right? Like, you know, since we were kids
Yeah.
and,
And we're
the
not that old, people. We're not that old.
not quite that old. Feel
Some
old,
days
but
it feels older than others.
yeah, people of a certain age, that's okay.
Yes,
Um,
mature.
did that sort of like spark your interest in technology, or were you still, obviously you're a young girl at that time, but like,
Yeah, I
was
mean,
there any special attraction to it?
I actually, so both of my parents are attorneys, and my dad was in tech, so he started in the Navy because that's where you could get to computers, and that's
Hmm.
why he joined. And then they both went to law school at night on the GI Bill after the Vietnam conflict was over, and Dad got out of the Navy. Um, so I said the two things I will not do are law and tech.
As I said in my intro, great, great life decisions.
Yeah. So that's how I ended up actually in psych. I actually I'm one of four, and we're all a year apart because Irish.
Hmm.
Um, my older sister was already studying engineering. And so my parents said, you cannot study engineering, even though I had kind of a knack for math and puzzles and stuff. And so that's why my degree is a Bachelor of Science in psychology, because my mom was like, well, you have to go to medical school because your sister's going to be an engineer. And I was like, okay. And so I studied, applied robotics in the robotics lab at Ohio State, the Ohio State University. Go Buckeyes,
The Yeah.
the Ohio State University. And it was an amazing place because we didn't have PCs. I still had a physical typewriter to do my term papers on, but we had access to time sharing and big computers. And the robotics lab that we worked with had a Rico arm that was kind of like one of those kind of factory arms.
Yep.
And we had a computer that probably was another Apple IIe or product, and on using like maybe Fortran, but
Yeah.
probably still basic. We modified the keyboard so that it was just a 5 slot interactive panel. So kids with paraplegic and quadriplegic children were learning science. And so the job was to learn to watch this robotic arm. And so that's really, I did it really kind of by accident. I saw the robotics lab. I volunteered to be a part of that study. And that's where I started really thinking deeply about my senior thesis in college was self-efficacy and the interactions of a child who is very physically limited able to use this kind of technology to do their science lessons, but also to hack it, to make it
Yeah.
reset and make a mess, to play, and to really look at what technology really can do when it serves us rather than us, sitting at long tables and ruining our shoulders and backs. There are so many delightful things when humans actually do humaning that is
Yeah.
assisted by compute and rather the other. And so that's where my senior thesis was self-efficacy and the chemical and educational and learning increases that can happen when we use all of the kind of creative models of kind of human engineering, if you will. So I tried really hard to stay away from tech, and I failed badly, and I'm still doing it now. That's still how I approach all technologies. We should be using it to augment what's best and serve us rather than the other way around.
I completely agree. I mean, I think a lot of times people think of computers or robots or, AI now, I guess, as an end in and of itself, but it should be, as you said, usable and, helping us do specific tasks that are too dangerous or we're not good at or we're too slow at. Not just like, hey, we built this, robot dog that can do flips. Okay, great. Who the
Right?
hell cares? What
Yeah.
do we need that for? Right? Like usable technology should be the definition, not like some offshoot.
Yeah, it's more than porn and guns, guys.
Yeah, it is.
Who
Hard to
knew?
believe, but if you look at the internet, that's not you would never know.
It's like the first application is porn and guns, but when we don't
It's kinda
weaponize technology and we actually interact with it and take the time, it's like it's like in a crowd, you can have a relationship in a bar, you can go to a concert, you can be around people. Having
mhm,
a relationship with a person takes work and vulnerability and give and take and understanding how the API works. I
yeah.
think technology is very similar. If you want to have a good relationship with technology, you really have to kind of take the time to say, what can this be? What should this be? What should it not be? And what are the rules of ethics here?
Yeah, what are the limits and where should we stop? Yeah,
Yeah.
and when should we just put it all down and go outside? Like,
Yes. Yes.
that's
And
the answer
that's
to
a
most
lot.
of it, honestly.
Yeah. Well, it's not roasting us.
Yeah, exactly. Alright, question number 2.
Oh
When
gosh,
did you
I only one.
first go online?
When did I first go online?
Yeah,
Um, I first went online. I mean, I feel like I'm President Clinton. Define online,
like
Dennis.
any kind of BBS or,
I
you
mean,
know,
as
CompuServe or something like that.
as early as I can remember.
Okay,
So my dad during the day would work for places like Standard Oil and Corning Glass and all these big companies. And at night he had this company. Oh my God, sorry, Dad. The product was called Abendade, and he sold it to CompuData. Oh, dad, sorry. Anyway, I can't think of the name of his company, which is terrible. Anyway, he and his buddy had a software company, and that's why we got the Apple II. It was from when they sold the business in 1982. So
okay.
even before that, the mainframes at night would go through this process where they had to kind of flush out their memory. Right? I'm
Yeah,
describing this terribly, but where you'd have a glitch in the code, and it had this long, scrolly kind of paper that was all attached to itself and had these like little rip off dots on the edge. So they come in the dot matrix printer, and there'd be this
mhm.
one. It was great if you're a kid, you can have like a continuous coloring book.
It was the best.
Um,
Yeah.
every night you would have these abends. And so the abends was really a code error mistake, and that would stop the data dump from going through smoothly. And so their software basically was able to address and correct the abend. And so he thought it was really cute to call it a band-aid, like a band-aid. And so they sold the company in 1982 to CompuWare. So even in those very, very early days, it wasn't really internet, but there was a call. I remember having those little devices that you put next to your dial-up telephone. It would go
Mhm.
even before you could plug it into the phone line. So, yeah, there really hasn't been a time when I've not been online. And, my first husband was in the military, and he had a card that had the 1-800 numbers. So you would call an 800 number, and that would be your access code
Yeah.
to
Yep.
go in. And so my dad had a whole sheaf of those things too. So I mean, it was even my courtship, my ex was at Stanford and I was at Fordham in New York, and we'd have like a one-liner. We'd connect to the university computer because I didn't have one in my apartment,
Yeah.
and we'd send like, "Hey, how are you?" And then I'd wait 24 hours. I'd go back online and I'd say, "Good." What a romance I had.
Courtship, as if we don't feel old enough, Michelle. That sounds
I
like
know.
the 16th century.
I know, it really does. Like, and then we send pigeons. It's really romantic.
The Pony Express brought my proposal.
Yeah. Still waiting.
Yeah. Is that I do like the idea of everything was not instantaneous, it's we're
Not at
so
all.
used to like synchronous communications where it's you send somebody a text and if you don't see the bubbles right away, you're like, are they mad at me?
Yeah.
What happened? Like, are they out of range? I don't know. Did they lose their phone? But yeah, I remember we got on CompuServe probably, I don't even know what year it would have been, like 85, somewhere 86 in that range. And then Prodigy was
Yes,
my first email address. And I can still remember the email address and the whole thing. And you'd send an email. I think I had like 4 friends that had email accounts, and that was it. But they lived in the same town. I don't know why I was sending them emails.
because you
Like,
could.
yeah, because I could. Right. And then you'd get a reply back, like you said, like 5 days later.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun on Saturday going to the football game or whatever. You're just like,
And you
"Okay."
couldn't write more than a sentence or 2. It wasn't
No,
like
not
an
really.
interface.
Yeah, and we would have to fight for time on the computer in my
Yeah.
dad's office and that whole thing, and now you think about it and you're just like, well, online is just it's just there. It's, literally the matrix. It's just sort of
Yeah. I mean,
everything.
this is what McNeely used to call web tone. Like, there's just, like
Yeah,
there's a dial tone that's on all the time, you would just expect it, and that was not always the case, of course,
yeah.
and now it's just web tone, it's just on all the time everywhere.
Which, obviously has its advantages, but, more and more, and I think it's just a function both of age and just overload of working in this industry. At some point, you're like, "I don't really wanna be connected all the time." Like, if I wanna go for a run, I'm gonna leave my phone at home if I'm possibly can, just
Yeah.
because I don't want to get a message or somebody call me,
Yeah, and
just be out
people
in
get
the
mad
woods.
with it, it's like there are times when I'm just like, "No, I'm not gonna," or they'll say, "Oh, did you get my email?" I'm like, I literally still I work at a very small company now. I've worked at very large companies, and I've been very public for a long time. I still get over 1,000 emails a day that are not in the spam file. So
Oh
I'm
my
like,
god.
I know, 1,000 a day.
How
I'm not very interesting. I can tell you, knowing myself. Self, are you? No, I'm not that interesting.
I wouldn't be able to handle that. I get a ton of
No.
email,
I just
just
surf on top of it, and, like, people are
yeah,
like, "Oh, did you see my email?" I'm like, "Chances are, no, I didn't."
yeah.
That sounds
Because
so wrong, but I'm just a really typical average older person that has collected people that know me, and people that, know I'll say yes a lot to stuff like,
yeah,
podcasts and things, and, um, you just have to relate to the world in a different way where it's kind of like I can't give you a email box 0. Some people do it, and they get just as much mail or more, and I don't. I just kind of like the waves come. I try to catch the ones. I try to filter for the work that I'm focused on, but it's just a different way of relating socially of like what is expected. And I think on the downside of that is I'm not trying to ghost anybody, but
yeah,
there's a lot of people who routinely this is just how they do business now. If they don't want to deal with you, they don't say no thank you, and I'm not talking about the unsolicited stuff because of course you can't respond to that stuff, but I've had like, I'm pitching my company now for a seed round. If we have spent an hour together and we've had this interaction and you said, "Okay, this is interesting. I'll go back to my team and see,
mhm,
what we're going to do here." I expect, "Hey, we met, not right for us now." Something. Goose egg. It's weird, and I'm like, and it does. I guess because I am a little bit older, it resonates with me. I'm like, I've taken the time to give myself some vulnerability with you. I've spent an hour of my day. We've shared some information together. I looked at your company. I did my research. We've had our thing.
yep.
I like it's why are you leaving me hanging, man?
It's weird. Yeah, I know, and it's weird because I feel like that's especially, for example, a VC, their whole business model depends on people like you coming to them with ideas, and if the idea is not right, then say no and be polite and move along,
Yeah, and then
People
I'll
talk.
say, "You know what? This guy's great. This is a fit. Go
Yeah,
talk to that guy." But it's bad training and bad form, I think, and it wastes everybody's time because there's
it
always an
does.
extra overhang of like, if this person is still in my maybe pile. So
Yeah,
it's just a weird
and it
again, it's like you're now letting technology run you instead of you running technology.
yeah. And word gets around, like, especially in the tech industry and even the security industry, which is even smaller,
Oh, yeah.
people know each other and they
Oh,
know,
yeah.
if you have a bad interaction with a VC or an angel investor, you're going to tell people, you'd be like,
Yeah.
steer clear of them, forget
Yeah.
it. They're going to leave you hanging,
Yeah,
you
and
know?
it's like that in so many aspects too. It's
Yeah.
it's like it used to be like, who's the best homeroom teacher to get?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And now it's, yeah, I don't under, yeah. Politeness and manners just kind of go out the window at some point, I guess. But
It's weird. It needs to go back into sort of our social programming, I think. It's like what are the expectations per context?
Mhm.
It, it's really easy to reach people's actual contacts, and you shouldn't expect for a response if you're cold soliciting, but
Yeah.
there should be rules of the road. Like if you get up to someone close enough and you hold your hand out in certain parts of the world, I'm a woman, I have to know that you're not gonna touch me. And so I know then not to put myself out there and embarrass myself or you by rejecting that. But
Yeah.
in other parts of the world, well, I guess most people are handshaking again or
Yeah.
elbow bumping or whatever weird awkwardness we're doing. But you have certain ceremonies that just say, and scene. This
Yeah.
is where this begins. It's the beginning of the hello world, and then end of transaction. Bye. Great to
Yeah.
see you. See you again soon.
Right.
It's the code of our ethics and our social fabric. And when you don't follow and create that common understanding, that's where all of the animalistic stuff happens, the hurtness and the ego stuff and the I'm not good enough stuff and all that
Mhm.
other storytelling stuff happens. And that's where I think you get to where we are, this is getting very philosophical, I guess, but
I
you
like
know,
it.
why don't we understand what real information is? How are there people that think there's some weird blue paint going on right now that are saving people from secret lasers?
Oh god.
Dennis, what? I'm trying to get my head around the latest conspiracy and I can't even go there.
Don't. No, it's not worth your time. Forget
It's
it.
sad.
Yeah, I know. The last 3 years haven't done anyone any favors in that respect, that's for
Ooh,
sure.
yeah,
Both on the, social graces and the mind virus front. People just, yeah, not great.
it's not great.
No, it's not. Okay, question number 3. What was your first exposure to hacker culture, however you wanna define that?
I was on a panel with Bruce Schneier, and this is the first time I'm meeting Bruce.
Mhm.
And there's like soft whispers as he goes down. Now I sat down the hall from Whit Diffie. So when I first met Whit, I came home and told my then husband, I was like, I met this guy that looks like Colonel Sanders. He's really smart. And he goes, was his name Whit? And I said, how did you know that? He's amazing. I love Whit. He's so great. So he and Susan were Landau were good buddies of mine. So I've met like and Marty Hellman. So I've met the security glitterati guys as people. So by the time I got to RSA, I was like, oh wow, these people are like fancy people in this community.
Yeah,
So Bruce was coming along and in his crazy, big blue-eyed Brucey way. And so we're getting on this panel together. And of course, everyone else is called to have the ceremonial, what are we going to talk on this panel prep? But not Bruce. So Bruce was at BT at the time. And they said, okay, here's how this works. Bruce likes to find the weakest lamb. And his whole shtick is the whole panel will be him attacking the lamb.
mm,
And I looked around, I was like, white dude, white dude, white dude, me, security, 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 heavily tech, psych major, me,
yeah.
lawyer, me. And I was like, oh crap, I'm the lamb in this picture. So I'm now like, I'm about to be humiliated in front of this community that I don't really know. And I'm sort of a weirdo because I'm privacy. And we get into it, and it turns out like Bruce has got my jam. Like cities, like security is more like cities with keys and like the bar on your steering wheel than a moat and something with this firewall that can be like this medieval, cosplay thing that we
Yeah,
pretend it is.
yep.
And I was like, that is privacy. The decision of when to be at a dinner party together and then you chat into the evening and someone gets tired and they stay. That doesn't happen at a restaurant. You don't get to stay. It's a different context.
Yeah,
So that's
yep.
that's why privacy is so much more nuanced and security promotes and protects that. So he and I are getting off like on fire on stage, and then this other guy was the lamb. And who knew? He was like some big, I can't even remember who it was, some pundit. And boy, Bruce like did him wrong. So afterwards I get off the stage and I'm like, I'm not the lamb. That's like unlocked. And he comes over and he like pushes aside some guy, like literally physically pushes aside some guy that's come up to like say, well, privacy doesn't exist, because I'm sure that's what he was saying.
Probably.
And
Yeah.
he like puts his hands on my shoulders and like looks at me and he goes, you're all right. I was like,
I am alright. That's
I'm
right.
all right. I got schneiered.
I can absolutely picture every single element of that
Right?
story. Having known him for 22 or 3 years, yes, I can. And I think the first time I went to RSA was 2001, and he one of his books had just come out, like, maybe a month before or something. So he was
Yeah.
doing all these book signings or whatever. And I had an interview scheduled with him, and I was walking through the Moscone with Bruce. And,
Oh,
this is a long time ago. You couldn't, and he's
it's
not a big guy.
amazing. Like
He's my,
Jesus is going
yep.
through.
He was getting stopped every 8 feet with, like,
Yes.
people just wanted to take pictures with, like, big physical digital cameras in 2001 or
Yeah.
whatever, or
Yeah.
have him sign something or whatever it was. It was the wildest thing. It was so funny. He's, very nice to people and all that kind of stuff, but it was just such a bizarre experience. And I
Yeah.
can I
I
can
mean,
picture you being like, "Oh, okay."
I was like, "This is good." Well, and the next time I saw him was at DEF CON. I've only been a couple times to DEF CON because I really don't have the skill set to, go as deep as a lot of those guys go.
Mhm.
I find it interesting, but it's, like they're never really buying what I'm laying down,
Yeah, it's a different thing.
It's a different thing, and I will go back again because I really, really enjoy getting into that culture because it's a whole different, beautiful precision level. But they used to have it always at the Hard Rock, and it was like there was like two little, it was like a barbell kind of shaped areas where the people would go to sessions or whatever, and there was this narrow corridor where you had to connect these two, and it
Mhm.
was, as a deeply introverted person, like a lot of people touching. And at some point,
Yes.
you couldn't even move forward or back. And you were like stuck in this thing. And I started to just freak out. Now, the other thing is, of course, I show up at a hacker concert. It was a concert of sorts, I
Well,
guess,
yeah, same
conference,
thing. Yeah.
wearing a bright pink sundress, and I'm just looking like Susie Homemaker, boop-a-doop-a-doo, and I'm like literally like jammed and stuck against a wall. No one's moving anywhere, and I'm like, what the hell's going on? Well, it's Bruce is walking down the hall, and it's like the Red Sea is parting for him, and I'm like pinned against the wall and kind of panicking, and he goes, Dennedy, she's with me, and he pulls me out, and I like walked through like Drano. So I'll always be grateful to him. I was literally losing my mind.
I can relate so much to that. I'm not an introvert and I don't really have anxiety like that, but I've been in those hallways at Black Hat or DEF CON or RSA or other places, or at like a football game where there's way too many people in way too small of a space, and you're just like, I don't know that I'm ever getting out of here,
Too much.
and
Yeah.
I'm about to lose my shit.
Yeah. It's
It's
just
not a great
too
feeling.
much. And I'm
Yeah.
surrounded mostly like I'm not a huge person, and I'm surrounded and
Neither
like
am I.
closed in
Yeah.
by male bodies. And it's
Yeah.
kind of like, and they don't mean me any harm. I mean, I don't feel scared, but I just feel like enclosed. Like there's no
Yeah.
like peeking out.
I don't like it. Don't like it at all.
Don't
Yeah.
like it.
Nope. Not at
So
all.
that's my hacker moments, I guess. People
Those are
hack
good.
it.
Those
Yeah.
are great stories. Okay, so question number 4. At what point did you think that this might be a career for you? Whether this is tech or privacy or whatever, or the combo of the two?
Yeah. Oh gosh. I mean, there were a lot of moments. Um, I was practicing patent law in the 90s, and I loved it because it was this, inventor versus idea. And then the law got involved and said, oh, you should pay him for that. Um, it's kind of, you know,
Makes
what,
sense.
and
Yeah.
and you know what? Hey, note to Hollywood, you really should pay them for that.
Yeah, pay people, Hollywood. Come on.
Pay
Jesus.
people. Like these creative people are not going to be replaced by your little body bots,
They are not.
because those guys are at DEF CON right now and they're all the same guy. So if you want things that are not all the same guy, you need to have actual creatives that do creative work.
For real.
Um, and I think it's like a teacher. They're incredibly underpaid for what they offer to society. Um, but that aside, so I did that, but I loved the litigation part. So notwithstanding my feelings of sort of insecurity and social anxiety, I also love being a litigator because it's a performance. Like if I could, I would do stand up comedy. I'm just not that funny on command.
I could see it. I
I
could
would
see it.
love it. Right. So I would love, like, that's my fantasy, is like doing stand up comedy and being Steve Martin and like smart comedy. I like smart comedy.
This makes
Um,
me wanna I would pass out, like, I couldn't oh my god. I public
right?
speaking, no problem, but some kind of public performance like that, I
Love
would
it.
oh my god, my palms are sweating thinking about it.
I
Oh,
love it, and it's the weirdest thing because parties I can't do. I tell you what, I've done, like, keynotes with stadiums, and I love it. It's such a vibe you get from the audience, like, it's a drug. So and being in the courtroom is like that, except that when you're doing not family court kind of stuff or drug cases, when you're
mhm.
doing, like, big patent suits and stuff, you're only actually in court, like, once every 7 years.
I'm sure. Yeah, I was gonna ask you that. Yeah,
You don't really it's not what it looks like on TV, and mind you, like, I got to argue, like, 1 hearing for,
because
like,
it usually never gets that far, right? Like,
you
there's
have to be very senior, and there's, like, I'm handing documents to the man,
mhm,
shoot, shoot. So I enjoyed it, but I had a great conversation with my, managing partner at the time, and it was a firm called Fish& and Neve, and, they patented the light bulb and the radio and some pretty good stuff.
I've done some
And
things.
it was an amazing firm, and the access and the types of cases were just outrageous, Polaroid versus Kodak and Exxon, amazing. So, he just said it was like 3 in the morning, and this man who's like in his 50s at that point, and I'm there in my 20s, and I'm like, oh my God, Ed, like, this is nuts. And he's like, Michelle, practicing law is like a pie eating contest, and the prize is more pie. So you better like it.
Oh god.
And it's such a good piece of advice. And so for privacy, it's like I got into privacy because I didn't know trademarks, and Sun kind of hired me to be an IP lawyer because the recruiter told them I was better at trademarks, but I really was a patent litigator. And so there was a little file, it was a manila file with one sheet of paper in it, and it said privacy on it, and that was the entire privacy program for Sun. But Scott had said this horrible thing, you have zero privacy, get over it. And he means it. To this day he means it, bless him. And so the task was write a privacy policy for the marketing department and help this group that was Privacy at Sun, which was Jonathan Fox and this woman, Julie Wang, I think her name was. I can't remember, but Jonathan and I stayed together for 20 years. He's still at Cisco. And so I was basically their assigned lawyer, and that's how I got into it. And the minute I got into it, I was like, this is ephemeral rights about a topic that is like a fruit of the mind, which is a story about a person that we either tell, observe, store, or create about actual individual people. So,
Yep,
very much like a song is something that's created from a person, is propagated, and can be all sorts of forms. Privacy, to me, very much can be kind of broken down, if you will, into an intellectual property. Sometimes we get paid for stuff, and
right.
sometimes other people get paid for your stuff. So, and thinking about adding the additional ethics and morality on top of that really went back to my heart of like working with these handicapped students and their families and all the implications about self-efficacy. That's
Mhm.
privacy for me, is like what all of the sort of stuff. And so I really got into it, and then I had my oldest daughter, September 2001. So my daughter was 6 days old when the planes hit. I was in California. Whew, what a day. So my
That was
roommates in New York were from Cantor Fitzgerald. No one had really heard of that firm before. So I lost like 30 friends instantly before we even knew anything else. We knew everybody at Cantor was going to be dead if they showed up to work that day. And I had booked my mom on flight 93 because they were living in Princeton at the time. I only took her off the flight because my
mhm.
daughter was late being born. So I booked the flight for September 14 instead of the 11th. So she was booked on flight 93.
Oh my god.
So I am sitting there with a 6 day old kid. I'm like pumped up on hormones, watching people I love get slaughtered. My mother almost gets slaughtered. If you think I'm crazy now, can you imagine the level of Michelle circa 2001? So then I see on the TV, I see Scott McNeely and Larry Ellison saying, privacy's dead. We're going to put all of our data into a database and protect this nation. And they weren't saying it to try to hurt people. They really were thinking, I sell databases and I sell servers, and we're going to get this intelligence right. And
It's
what they,
true. Yeah,
they didn't have the benefit of, that we forget, which is it wasn't that we didn't have enough information. We didn't listen to people who said, hey, we have information. and it is aberrant behavior, and here's the risk. Do
Yeah.
something about it. We
The
had
information was there. Yeah.
it was all there.
Yeah.
So we didn't need to surveil everything to get there. We needed
Yeah.
to like have more people that said, "Hey, here's a diaper bag. The raisins didn't grow in the bag. Someone put them there." So
Right.
that's when I did the business plan with Jonathan and said, this needs to be a business unto itself, and looked across the systems and said, what do we sell? You know, we had Wit Diffie, we had, Gosling there talking about garbage collection, and we had hypervisors before they were called
Oh, yeah.
hypervisors. We had
Yeah.
containers. We had all of the things that we really needed to think about if we wanted to take an ephemeral right, manage its control over a disparate society, and have different ethics of, collectivism in the East and individualism, and sort of a quasi mix of that over here, and somehow build a digital system that respects all of that nuance. And so, it's a drug, and I've been high ever since.
22 years is a long time to be high,
It's a
Michelle.
long high, man. That's why I look like this. I'm actually only 22 years old.
Oh my God. Oh boy. It's funny, not funny, but for anybody that was not in the security or tech industry after 9/11, that is what sort of birthed this industry in a lot of ways. The security industry was tiny, tiny, tiny at that point.
Yeah,
It was AV and a few other things. And then it became the Patriot Act, and it became surveillance, and it became everything that we all see now. And physical and infosec merged for a little while. And then people were like, that's not going to work. But that's where all of that came from, kids. And it was
yeah,
those years were like '02, '03, '04, '05. Like, I think of them as like the Richard Clark years of him
yeah.
just going around and talking about digital Pearl Harbors and that kind of stuff. And,
Oh
um,
gosh,
you know,
cyber became a thing then. It was
oh
cyber
yeah,
wars, and yeah,
cyber. Yes, cyber became the word. And I remember the first couple times I heard that, I was like, what in the hell? Doesn't that mean robots? Like, what are we talking about? Like, that's the way I thought of it in like the '80s and '90s growing up. Like,
yeah,
cyber meant like some sort of robot or,
yeah,
AI system, not
yeah,
every machine,
yeah,
you know?
exactly. Well, it's funny, like I just had the absolute honor of, I still haven't seen her feet, but on video talking to Gail Ann Hurd, who's the director on the Terminator. So she calls him Jim, which I think is funny, like Jim Cameron. So she's
You know,
she's
Jim.
she's working, Jim, she's working on AI and ethics and this stuff. And so I got to meet her, and I said, wow, it's I wish I hadn't read your bio before we met. I'd like to think that you're an AI geek and not like, wow, you,
Yeah,
Walking Dead, Terminator, like the abyss. Wow. So I got like through my awkwardness, and I said, what is your relationship to AI? I've got a lot of hope for the promise of it, but I look at the world through a lens of the giant change makers are payment online, search, and this AI, and
yeah,
not because AI is technologically different. Like my book's intro is by an AI data scientist. That was 10 years ago, and I'm not a
yeah.
shaman. It's just like I was paying attention. And she just looked at me and she said, Jim and I warned you about this in 1982. And I
It's true.
realized, what was she talking about? I was like, that's when they actually copyrighted the treatment for the Terminator. And so
Yeah,
you're exactly right. Cyber came from science fiction, but they were right.
yeah,
Art needs to be celebrated because it allows us to run out risk scenarios in safe ways and have dialogues about the Terminator. And I was like, does this mean some super sexy guy's about to show up at my house? Because I'm ready. I'm ready for this.
is he just gonna come through the door? Because that'd be great. Yeah,
Right? My
sounds
future
awesome.
son is like waiting for me.
I was just watching that the other day, actually. It was on, like, TNT or something. It holds up. It's still
Yes.
really good, and
I
it's
still
still
want those
terrifying.
arms, man.
Good lord. Yeah, I know, I know. Okay, question
Just like, wow,
number
where was this gonna go? I don't know.
I don't know. Let's see what question we're on. Okay, number 5. What, if anything, was your alternate career idea? I think we know we went through your
Yeah, I
law.
wanna be a stand-up comedian. Before that, I wanted to be a hairdresser.
Hairdresser.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I'm not very good at any of these things.
There's still time. I
There's
mean,
still time. Yeah,
yeah.
I still I have fantasies still about going back to school and finishing my psychology, uh, master's or something, and being a therapist. I like people a lot. I like how they fit together.
You could do that. You definitely have time once you
I'm a
get
hot
the
mess. That's like the prerequisite for any shrink, right?
it's true. Yeah. You have to understand, heal thyself, and then you have to
Yeah,
understand what everybody else's problems are. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know if this will apply to you, but who was your hacker hero? It could be, I mean, you mentioned Wit, you mentioned Bruce. I don't know if those qualify, but or even just somebody that you looked up to in any of your various professions.
So I'll tell you. So hacker. So I have a positive connotation for hacker. Hackers to me are people that are like MacGyver is my number one hacker
Yeah.
fantasy hero.
We're on the
It's
same
like
page.
here's a tube of toothpaste and a tampon. Let's make a bomb.
Right.
And there actually was a little bit of science between a lot of the stuff that they were doing, right?
Yeah.
So I like that. I'll give you Bo Holland. I don't know if you know Bo.
Mm-mm.
Good dude. I think he's still the CEO of All Clear ID. Oh, and Nico Sell, of course, although she's
Oh,
always very, very private. So CEO of Wicker, and now she's doing like hyper floaty board surfing things for military stuff.
oh yeah. And for old people like us, she used to run press at DEF CON, like and
Yes.
Black
And
Hat. Black
yeah,
Hat.
and Melanie's still I think this was Melanie's last year for PR stuff, but and
Yeah.
Nico actually got me involved as a goon. I was a goon one year at Black Hat for DEF CON Kids.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, it was really fun. And she and Bo, so she introduced me to Bo, who had a product looking at after breaches. So All Clear ID is basically the non-Experian, non-reselling your data version that you can pre-contract with, and they'll do breach repair, and they have call centers, and they'll do all
Okay.
that stuff. But he was really early on, and he approached Nico, and Nico approached me and said, in every one of these things where there's a major breach, we send out these notices, and anywhere from 11 to 15% of these families that send all of their stuff in, all the social security numbers that live in the house, we're seeing kids. And so they started looking into this data and realizing, gosh, you know what, if you don't need your credit score, other people are using it, because it
Yeah.
used to be dead people, and
Right.
then they went to birth records
Yeah.
and they would start attacking. And a lot of, sadly, in you know particularly areas where money is tight, it's parents or foster
Mhm.
caregivers or whoever actually doing it to their own children because they've run out of all the credit on their own. So I met those guys and I was like, I'm in. And we started this whole campaign on children's ID and took it to Washington to say you shouldn't be just issuing social security number in even tranches. And they were like, well, we're not an identity. Look at what it says in the back of your social security card.
Except everyone uses it as
That's what it functionally is.
exactly. Yeah.
And then they had like, this is the greatest moment for a startup founder, that he was like, why don't you try the product? And so I put my kids' social security number in. She had been hacked 3 times. She was 8. She had the worst credit score possible. And the first time her ID had been used was 11 years before she was born. So
Oh my
she
god.
came with a financial birth defect, and I had no idea. And I'm a geek,
That's crazy.
no idea. So thank God. So she's now 22. And had I not met Bo through Nico, um, getting her first job, getting cleared to work at the bank that she works at, and getting her first apartment, it would have been really hard because it probably took,
Yeah.
Bo and his expert team probably 8 to 9 months to clean up her credit score. So
That's
that
wild.
was a real turning point for me of like, enough of this like helping governments and writing laws and being like, oh, look at me. It's like we have people who are very vulnerable who are being harmed, actively harmed by just our own failure to control identity and manage integrity.
Yeah. That's a horrifying story, but it's also one that I've heard hundreds of times,
Yep.
easily. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you tell those kind of things to people that are outside this industry and they're like, I don't understand. How would that work? Like, oh my God, it's the simplest thing in the world. And there's so
Yep.
many different ways for it to happen. And
Yeah,
like
we're
you said,
addicted to credit here. We want it
yeah,
instantly.
totally. And you don't realize it until it's way too late, especially in the case of a child, because your second grader isn't applying for auto loans. But when they do go apply for school loans or auto loans or an apartment, they find out their credit score is zero and they're just absolutely screwed. And you're just
Yep.
like,
Where you find out that they're, I've seen horror stories getting into the business. You find out like, first time kid goes out after dark, taillights out, gets pulled over. Well, according to the police officer's records, he's a felon, he's a child
yeah,
molester.
yeah,
And so this kid gets locked up over the weekend because they can't have a process to get him out. 16 years old, put in lockup as a convicted,
yeah.
pedophile drug felon. And I mean, talk about like an interesting first drive experience, not exactly what you want for your 16-year-old.
No,
It
it is not.
have very real consequences.
Yeah, yeah.
God, we're going dark,
I
Dennis.
know. Let's get a
Dark.
little happier.
Yeah.
Okay. Question number 6. What's your favorite hacker movie? And you can.
Oh, war games. Easy, easy.
Excellent answer. I
Totally
love it.
holds up. Learn, Joshua, learn.
Yes, I watch that all the time, but it's been on HBO and for the last month or so. So I've been watching it like
It was
over
just
and
on the
over.
airplane. I was on an airplane. I was like, oh, war games is
It's so good. Oh my God, it's so good.
oh my God, Joshua.
I know. It's so great. And like all the forget about like all the goofy sort of like military industrial complex stuff with like the stupid, general
Yeah, with the
in
rubber.
NORAD and whatever. It's
Yeah,
just like the themes and like the overall story of it are so great. And I mean, despite the fact that I have like a Ferris Bueller print over my shoulder right there,
yeah,
War Games, sneakers, and Ferris Bueller to me are the
yeah,
holy trinity.
yeah.
You
That's
know,
true. Ferris Bueller is a good one too. I don't think of it as a hacker movie, but it totally is.
yeah, I mean, he's like social engineering 101, that guy,
Everything,
Yeah.
everything. Yeah,
I remember when I showed that to my kids when they were teenagers, it was so funny. Like my daughter, who's exactly your daughter's age, was like, "This is kind of like you. This
yeah,
guy acts a lot like you." I was like, "Yeah, I
yeah.
know." She was
That's
like,
right.
"Is this what you were like in high school?" I was like, "Yeah, sort of,
Kind
sort
of.
of, not,
Yeah,
not to
without
that
the
extent."
Ferrari, but yes.
Yeah, yeah, no Ferrari. My sister didn't hate me that much, but
I
yeah,
forgot about the hating sister too. That was, I mean,
Jennifer Grey, so good.
Jennifer Grey. I mean,
Yeah, you
yeah.
can understand why she hated him. I mean,
Oh, God.
he got
Yeah,
away with everything, right?
he
And
did. Of course, and with a smile on his face. I mean, it's just everything, just chef's kiss, every little bit of that movie.
yeah, we did a podcast on that several years ago, and one of the women on the podcast with me, I had never heard this theory at the time. She said that, oh, there's this whole theory that Ferris doesn't exist and he's a figment of Cameron's imagination.
Oh my
He's
gosh. That's Usual Suspects plus Ferris Bueller.
sort of, yeah. And if you watch it with that in your mind, you're like, oh boy, you can totally read it that way
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
Ferris is off doing all the stuff that Cameron wishes he could do.
exactly. He's like the alter ego of the little rich boy who couldn't.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
it's I mean, I'll have to watch it again just with that in mind. I like that a lot.
It'll appeal to your psychology
Yeah,
background.
I
Yeah,
really like it a lot.
yeah, it's great. War Games is a great answer though. I love that movie so
Uh,
much.
so good. Holds
It's
up.
great. Perfect Cold War movie too. Like all the
Yes.
paranoia and like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's great. Okay, next question. How do you describe your job to people? So at the cocktail parties you hate to go to, if you
Yes.
meet someone new,
I shouldn't say that, like, please invite me to your cocktail parties. I might not go, but I wanna be invited.
she's worth inviting people, please. Yeah,
Yes. And if I have someone to go with, I'll go and I'll enjoy myself. So I
there
don't
you
wanna
go.
say I'm a complete, like, living under a rock person. Um, how would I describe my job? So right now, my job, I have sort of two. I have two jobs. I'm the partner in a services firm called Provatus, and doing strategy and wicked problem solving. And wicked problems are not just like wicked dude Boston, but
Yeah.
it's actually a genre and a type of problem that is characterized by no ending point. So poverty, hunger, privacy,
Mhm.
thermonuclear warfare, millions of different stakeholders. It's always changing. And every time you solve a problem in a wicked problem set, you create a new one. So, like, you've encrypted something, now you have a key management issue,
Mhm.
or you're storing documents for compliance, now you have stored documents for compliance. So, wicked problems are like that. And Brian Lee, who's a former lieutenant colonel in the US Army, his job was anti nuclear proliferation. So, he was the
Oh,
coordinator from the Army's perspective for all the branches in the Pentagon, and was like out there in the field counting warheads and things. So, when I met him, I was running an analytics company, and was just like talking to him about what his military experience had been. I had no idea. He's a very humble guy. I was like, they don't hand out colonel stuff like as a participant.
willy-nilly.
You don't just get older in the military and then become a lieutenant colonel. Like, you have
Not
to like
really.
have some shizzle going on. So Brian's got the shiz. And so when he said, privacy is a wicked problem, it really was a turning point in my mindset of like, this isn't just finding better words to explain a boring problem,
Yeah.
dress it up or dumb it down. I hate when people say, let's dumb it down. It's not a dumb problem. It is a smart people problem. So we have to deal with it with intelligence. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean it can't be explained to a 5-year-old.
In
5-year-olds are
simple
probably
terms.
the
Right.
most intelligent creatures on the planet because they're still listening. So we do that, and that consulting work is absolutely germane to my other role, which is the CEO of Privacy Code. So I run a SaaS software company. We are pre-seed. So what is my job right now? Talking to a lot of people who have stockpiles of cash and saying, this is a $1 billion company. And I saw people's problems with our platform, which is great. And Rosemary Cooperberg is one of my first clients, and I understand that rosemary is actually an herb, but I always say that she's my favorite spice. Um, she actually did a little testimonial video for me because I was like, dude, like, how did you take the leap of faith to get on this privacy code platform? It's a different way of working. It's creating a system of record and a way of communicating across teams, across disciplines, across time, so that you can actually, little by little, get your security and privacy posture, get your data quality, get your AI ethics, all not just documented but communicated and completed. So there's a lot of
Yeah.
checklist kind of companies, and there's like, I'm going to sniff your code companies, which is adorable. It's like, I'm going to sniff away my BO by, no, you got to use some soap. I'm the soap. Then you can come sniff and it smells great. But if you haven't done anything, it stinks up in there.
Yeah.
So whatever. So I love a sniffer company eventually. Not to denigrate them all, and
There's a
they're
lot of
great after you've done privacy code. Get a sniffer company because you can prove it.
yeah.
Um, but that's what I do. Is she said, I'm the best thing ever. She just called me out of the blue one day, and this is why I made her do a video. No good deed goes unpunished. She said, Michelle, I just calling because I'm probably procrastinating, but this inspires me. Like, I want to do a good job, and it's hard to do a good job in privacy and security. I want to be creative and strive towards excellence and not do the same thing over and over and still have people go, well, what's the risk? Or, oh, people post their lunch, there's no privacy. And you're just like, oh God, not again.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, I've heard this for 2 decades. Let's move
Yeah.
along.
It's like, I actually want to have us using technology to serve us again. I want
Yeah.
us to feel good about AI. I want to feel good about quantum and not kill the planet, and get our communication right and get our facts straight and have some manners online again. And it's inspirational. And for me, it was the same way in return. Is like, that's why you do a startup when you're a middle-aged old lady who used to get paid a ton of money. Now I'm like, I was in group 6 on the airplane the other day. I did not like it.
Can't have that.
I wanna be
Yep.
on group 1 again. Sorry, my phone's ringing. Shh.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can't, like, if I'm past group 2, like, I'm just not getting on the plane. Like, I can't. I'm sorry.
I had to
It's
check
not for
a
me.
bag.
It's not I can't do it.
I was like, "Here, you can just have my clothes."
Yeah. I've turned my kids into travel snobs too, like,
Oh,
you know,
totally.
pre-check, all that kinda stuff, and they like, my daughter was flying by herself a few months ago, and she was like, "They don't even have Clear here. I don't wanna go stand in that other line." I was like, "Oh my god,
No,
you're so
I
my
know.
daughter."
It's so bad, but it's like,
It
yeah, I
but
have, like,
once
my
we figured it
wave.
out, yeah, I'm not standing in line, forget it. No way.
Oh,
I'm not doing that. I don't wanna be with the people.
I see. There's a
Yeah,
theme here, Dennis. There's a
I know.
theme.
I know. Alright, we have 2 more.
Okay.
This one's I guess technically 3, but this is sort of a two-part question. What's your proudest moment,
Mm,
and what would you say was your biggest mistake?
whew.
This can be career-wise. I mean, I you don't have to talk about anything else,
So many.
and you can skip if you want.
So
You can just
many.
go with the proudest moment if you'd like.
Yeah. Like, this is how I'm wired is, like, I instantly go to the negative of, like, "Ooh, that's humiliating. Oh, yeah,
Oh,
that
me
was
too.
bad.
Yeah.
Ooh, bad hire." I mean, I in some so many of my biggest mistakes have boiled down to, and actually there was a VC that I should probably call last summer. She said to me, "I don't know about investing in you. I think you're too nice." And I was so offended
Mm.
because I actually am quite nice.
Yeah,
Um,
and there's nothing wrong with that.
well, but she nailed me because I like to take in stray dogs, and I keep hoping that people want to be Rosemaries and be excellent and try their best.
Gotcha.
If they're cleaning houses, like I cleaned houses to put myself through law school. I I wanted that toilet to shine, man. I had some pride in that toilet. When you came
Mhm.
in there and you sat your little rich butt down on my toilet, it was a clean toilet. So whatever I'm doing, I want to do a good job and I want to like do it creatively. I want to think about, but not everyone's like that. So
No.
start to get in the mindset where you're like everyone is well intentioned, everyone really has a good heart, everyone really has best interest, everyone really wants to succeed. You find that unfortunately the weakest egos and the people who are hurt, they will hurt others all the way into their own graves. They'll hurt others until they've lost this opportunity that will brush by them, like a stranger in a crowd.
Yep.
And it's hard for me to really wrap my head around that. And so my biggest mistakes have often been kind of overdoing it with this truly arrogant notion that I can somehow help that.
Mm.
It's arrogant on my part to be like, I can help you, I can fix
Yeah.
you. Like, I can barely fix myself. So a lot of my mistakes are that. Financially, my biggest mistake was I got I met with a guy named Kulpreet Rada, and he'll never remember me. I'll never forget him. He was the head of IP for Google, and he was lawyer number 6, and he was looking for lawyer number 7. And they were pre-IPO, and I said, okay, great. I'm an IP lawyer, and I've just picked up this new privacy thing. And you, my friends, you're gonna need some privacy here at this Google thing, because I met Rajiv Motwani, who was the boys, and he still called them the boys, PhD advisor. And he said, Michelle, these guys are going to be bigger than Alta Vista. Go talk to these Google people. And I was like, ooh, Google bigger than Alta Vista? That's amazing.
Bold claim, sir.
Yeah, bold, man. Because I, at the time, was on Jeeves because I liked me some PG Woodhouse. And I was like, "Ooh, Ask Jeeves was a good search engine. It was cool."
It was a great idea. I love that idea.
It really was. It was like, "Here's your
Yeah.
little platter." It was really cute at the time, and it was a lot less NASCAR
Yeah.
advertising, which was really the Alta Vista model.
Yeah.
And then along came Google, and so I met with this guy, and he's really bright. And he was a former patent guy, and he was like, "Oh, he's like, really like your vibe and everything." And they had like the plastic balls in the hall that were like the little dots for
Yep.
Google and all primary colored and stuff. And they still had the sun logos on the buildings because it was Garcia Avenue. And I said, yeah, this is like, I'm so excited about what you're doing. Like intellectual property, like if you're going to be the Library of Alexandria, which was their pitch at the time,
Hmm.
then copyright is a really significant issue because it turns out people that write books, like they kind of want to own their shit. Like
Yeah.
it's a thing and
Yep.
it's actually like a law as it turns out. So, and a law that I know. And then this privacy thing, most of the laws were around governmental protection and like librarian privacy because the librarians knew before anybody else because they were the original search engines what
Hmm.
you took out from the library, like how to build a bomb or
Right.
looking at girly magazines or how to be a serial killer or whatever. And so the Video Protection Act happened because congressmen like to look at porn and the librarians started to protect their constituents who were actually checking out books because they recognized a lot of the folks who actually spend a lot of time in libraries. I was one of those kids are kind of vulnerable people.
Me
They're
too.
kind of nerding out and they're kind of like finding themselves. And the librarians really like some of my fondest childhood memory are librarians that really like help you pique your interest. And so anyway, going into Google and thinking, wow, you're going to basically be the world's librarian. You're going to have a ton of privacy issues and security issues and children's issues and whatever. And they were like, whew, you're interesting. However, we want you to do socks. Sarbanes-Oxley.
Oh God. Oh no.
And my tiny little non-financially wise heart just
Mm.
shriveled into like, meow.
Yeah.
And so I went away. And lucky for them, about a year and a half later, they hired Nicole Wong, who is amazing. And she was there for a very long time before Keith came to take over the reins over there. So, they are well advised, but man, that would have been pretty good to have that stock. Although now it'd probably all be owned by my ex husband. So it's fine. I'd still be poor.
That's a tough one. That's a
That's a
tough
tough
beat.
one.
Yeah.
I've made some errors. I think my proudest thing I have to say is publishing the manifesto, um,
Yeah.
professionally anyway. I mean, my proudest thing is like these two crazy lizards that skittered out of my body. My two daughters, of course. It's wild. Like you've got kids. It's like when you see them being you, you're
It's
like,
yep.
this is kind of terrifying. And they're better versions of me,
Yeah.
and
Hopefully.
it's
Yeah, we hope, right?
scary. They're
Yeah.
terrifying.
Mhm.
And I watched them
It is.
making mistakes that I would make, so all of that. But I think publishing the manifesto, my dad had been pushed into retirement by Cyber at CIBER. It's like a consulting firm, and
I
he
remember.
turned 70. And we both have multiple sclerosis, my dad and I, and mine is a lot less manifest than his. Knock on wood. And so he was looking quite ill, and he was very overweight, but he was almost wheelchair bound at that point. And so they were like, whoa, you're 70, you're on the road every week. Like you could see the liability blinky lights going, dude, you got to
Yeah.
go retire. And you're 70, man.
Yeah.
So I was worried for him because he went to law school at night and became a patent lawyer for his friends, in addition to being a security architect. Like he was that guy.
Yeah.
And so we actually wrote the manifesto because I was worried that retirement was going to kill him. So we sat down to like etch out our conversations that would happen every Saturday. And we started to realize, like, between the white papers I had written with Jonathan Fox at Sun about like the Sunray being, one of the best privacy devices ever because it's just a dummy terminal with protection on the back end.
Yeah.
And I presented that paper on privacy engineering in China in 2004. So this is early. We were talking, using that terminology and everything that dad taught me about COBOL and business rules. And like Tom Redmond's still out there doing stuff, John Zachman's stuff, the classic things that protect us in compute because they're grounded in society. And so that was, and then the decision to make it open source so
Yeah.
that everyone could just get it for free if they wanted it. We could talk to governments about it without any sort of commercial interaction. And that was probably, again, a dumb mistake financially because it's now like over 1 million downloads and going. And it'll be the 10-year anniversary for the book
That's
this coming January. And I should write a second edition, but people are like, oh, do you have an updated version? I'm like, if you read the future section, I'm talking about IoT, but I'm really talking about AI.
yeah.
And if you read the intro, it's Bonobo talking about swarm intelligence, which is actually AI.
Literally what we're yeah.
It holds up. It
Yeah.
holds up.
Also, writing books is a pain in the ass, so you probably don't wanna do it again.
Well, my next book is going to be, well, I have to do a second edition. I did say I was going to do that. So I'm doing a treatment for that because there's been a lot of legal updates as well, too. GDPR
Oh,
was
yeah.
in draft at the time, and now it's a thing. But the other big ambitious project is a book called Manifested. And it really is this everything we've been talking about. Like, this
Oh,
is the journey of a manifested life, and, you know, all of the manifestations of really going back to that first moment when the first kid hacked our robot and had a beaker of like green liquid in a beaker. And he looks at me with his glint, and it took 17 steps to cause the bug to happen to make it reset. And the robot just went crazy, and it broke the glass and then reset in its little nesting
yeah.
state. And all of the techies, the hardware and the software people, and the teachers and the aide, they're freaking out. It was probably a $2 million setup, national science grant. And it's just this little kid and me, eye to eye. He's laughing. And I'm like,
Love
that's
it.
that's the magic.
That's awesome. I love that. Okay, last question before my battery dies.
See, that's good.
What's your best piece of security advice?
Well, my most infamous is my password rule, which is make your passwords like your panties, wildly exotic. Don't share them with others and change them from time to time, only if you followed rules 1 and 2. If you're going to change them a lot and just do dumb things, then don't do that. But I think that's my most like legendary off the cuff thing that has followed me through the years.
It's a
And
good
then,
one.
and then my best advice overall, security and privacy advice is imagine if that data was about a person that you cared about. How would you take care of that? How would you honor that? How would
Yeah.
you feel about that? And that helps you to write your business rules. You don't have to look up all these requirements first. My engine will help you do that, by the way. Vote for privacycode.ai. But before you begin, have a sense of what is good.
Yeah, that's
It's
great
really that
advice.
simple, and it's that
Yeah,
hard.
it doesn't have to be complex, honestly. Okay, and lastly, do you have any questions for me?
Oh my God, Dennis, so many questions for you. I mean, where the next body is going to turn up? Is it going to be in Boston again?
Mm,
Like, where's my next beach read, sir?
it's coming. I've written, I don't know, 3-ish chapters.
Ooh,
So, I don't know, maybe hopefully it'll be ready for next summer
ooh,
if I can actually sit down and, you know how it goes. You have to
I know
like
how it goes.
you have a certain part in your head, you get that part on paper, and then you have to sort of like, figure out the next part. But
I'm
um,
so excited. I have a fiction book in my head that's been sitting there for like 25 years. Eventually, we'll
oh,
we'll get there. Because
get it out.
I'll give you a quick story. That is supposed to be a question about you. See this selfishness.
That's okay. God, Michelle.
I know I'm such a bitch. Um, I did a discovery with this guy, Robert Wilson, who's a lovely guy. He's a partner somewhere big now. See, because he's smart, he stays and collects that money. He doesn't go off and do a startup. But it was for Quest Diagnostics, and it was a patent case. And um, we had to go out in the valley somewhere in LA, go out to this warehouse, non air conditioned, out in the middle of the desert. At that time, it was required for women to wear pantyhose and polyester situation. So I was all in a dirty warehouse, like digging through boxes, and we came across this pallet and opened this box, and there was a hand and a heart in like sort of half filled, jars floating in fluid. And we started going through this box, and we're like, holy crap, there were body parts in this warehouse. And what had
What?
happened is they had bought a warehouse that had been formerly serving the sheriff's department in LA. So when we were looking through these files, we saw lynchings and evidence and stuff that was clearly not prosecuted that we did
Yeah,
turn over to the authorities, and we were like, "Holy crap." And I thought, "Wow, what a great opening for a thriller," because a lot of the lynchings, I mean, you think about the lynchings in the South, during the '60s, LA, baby. Whoa,
yeah.
and a lot of it was hidden and literally hidden in the desert in this warehouse that looked like an Indiana Jones kind of situation.
That's
And there
exactly what just came to my mind was the
yeah,
Indiana Jones
and
warehouse. Yeah.
it's just like that, with one of these big metal,
Yep.
dusty places, and yeah, so that's when Robert and I find body parts, and, he was actually a former coroner before he went to law school to become a patent litigator,
Oh my
and,
god.
yeah, so he was like, "Yeah, not my first rodeo." I was
Gee,
like,
I guess not.
"Okay."
Jeez, that's a wild story. I
That's a
might
good opener. That's been, like, in my mind. I'm like, "That wouldn't that be a great opening?" Like, follow
it
through
really
with
would.
cases, right?
Yeah, that's a perfect opening. Yeah, that's all right. Well, let me know when you're ready. I can help.
Okay, good. I need it. I need all the help I can get. So, I have more questions for you, but I wanna see your feet someday.
Yep, we'll do it in person. All
Excellent.
right. Michelle, this was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
This was so fun. This is like therapy.
Oh, good. I'll send you my bill.
Thank you. I don't have
All
any
right.
money. I'll send it to my ex.
Perfect. All right, Michelle, thank you so much. I'll talk
Thank
to you soon.
you. Have a great day.
You too.
Take care.